Thank you guys so much for coming out. I know the kind of crowd we have today are people who love the producer, the beat makers, the people who have made this culture what it is today. And today, we have arguably one of the best collections of those guys that you could ever get in the world. Shout out to BMI and Flight School for putting this together. I'm not going to waste any time. Let's get this thing started. First man I'm going to bring out, this guy is responsible. I don't even want to get wrong how many millions of records this man has sold. However, he is basically responsible for the entire sound that came out of New Orleans in the 90s. Him and one other guy who you'll meet as well, responsible for so much of the sound we have in music today. He is part of Beats by the Pound. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome KLC. This next guy I'm about to bring to the stage, he's an awesome addition to this panel, not only because he's nice with the beats, but he brings a whole other element, which is being the greatest hip-hop engineer of the modern era. You know him from countless, again, I'm not going to mess up the millions upon millions of records he's a part of. He's one of the greatest engineers to ever do it, and a producer as well. Give it up for Young Guru. And the man who I'm about to bring out right here not only is an incredible producer, hits for so many artists that we know and love, many of which I'm sure he worked with Young Guru on them happening. He's also an incredible DJ and a record collector who has every single record that I want. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Just Blaze. And before we get to our final participant, I just want to take a moment and show love to everyone who came out here today, because the people who I see sitting here are the people who pay attention to the culture. My name is Peter Rosenberg, by the way. I host a podcast called Juan Epstein. Anyone here ever heard the Juan Epstein podcast? So on that podcast, we try to do our best to talk to guys like this and to document the history of this culture. So if you've never heard it before, subscribe on iTunes. Almost everyone who's here today has been on it. I promise they all will be on as time goes on. So without wasting any more time, the man who helped pull this all together and brought me in, and one of the greatest producers to ever do it, an incredible DJ. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Mannie Fresh. All right. A lot of ground to cover here, and I think I want to jump in with something that just came up when I was talking to Kay before we started, which is about the relationship between Mannie Fresh and KLC. How did your guys' relationship begin, and were you cool during those years? Did you know each other beforehand? Tell us a little bit about that, because obviously the rivalry between Cash Money and No Limit was such a thing.
Well, first of all, everybody on Cash Money and No Limit knew each other before the labels even existed. Me and Mannie DJ'd in the same club. We pretty much swapped sounds for years, pretty much our entire career. And what got me and Mannie so tight is an experience happened in a studio with two local female artists that I was in there doing a session, so I left my 808 up in there. And Mannie had a session the next day and was like, oh shit, they got an 8 and they have MIDI on it. And so it's just so ironic that Mannie, these two females was beefing with each other, and Mannie was producing the disc records for both of them. But you know, Mannie was giving each other, you know, information on things though. So, but anyway, you know, me and Mannie, we go way back. We was always DJs first, and you know, and we just you know kicked it in. He was the top DJ downtown, and I was the top DJ uptown. but we DJing at one club that you had to do a gun check to get in.
Manny, do you have recollections of that?
Yeah, I mean, the hardest thing in the world was I wasn't going to get that 808 back. I couldn't believe, I was like, man, he left his drum machine here. He's slipping. And I'm like, it's an 808, wow. But like he said, the good thing was we started out both DJing, like he said, at probably like the grimiest club in New Orleans at that time. And we didn't even really look at it like, it would ever be like a Cash Money or a No Limit or whatever. We was just two kids that loved music, what we was doing. And like he said, everybody that was on both labels pretty much knew each other. They grew up in a circle of music, either getting beats from KL or getting beats from me, or either coming to the club, rapping on the mic or whatever. So the relationship was always there. We always, knew each other from the early 80s, and just throwing down on the block.
Manny, what was the one record during that time when you guys are both producing hits and you're both working for your camp? Is there a record that KLC did that made you like, shit, that is going to be a tough one right there?
Magnolia Slim, like, you know what I'm saying? Y'all know him as Soldier Slim, like, you know what I'm saying? He had this record, If You Want It, I Got It. Like, the whole city still sang that song. You know what I'm saying? And it was just like that movement was crazy. Like, that record right there just did it.
Kay, what about you? Was there a Manny record during that era you really loved?
It was the BG record, Chopper City. That did it. That was a song that pretty much put BG out there up front and locally. And it's just ironic. Him and Soulja Slim, like how me and Fresh are, and you know what I'm saying? Him and Soulja Slim was the exact same way. You know what I'm saying? So it was always a tie, but it was just that Chopper City record. That's when Pen and Pixel was just, BG standing outside and it's raining bullets. You know what I'm saying? So just that entire record, you know what I'm saying, was just.
So we're gonna bounce around a little bit and talk like we just did about your careers, but also we want to have some overall questions about production. And I'm gonna send this one to Guru because I think you're the perfect person, given the role that you have in the studio. This is a very common question, but I think people will be interested to hear it from you. The difference between a producer and a beat maker.
Yeah, that one's easy. The beat maker is just the person that makes the beat. The producer is somebody who hands in a finished record. Meaning that you can sit in your room and make a beat, but the producer is the guy that's sitting with the artist, talking about the concept of the record. If there's vocals to be coached, he's actually coaching the vocals, and I don't mean just rap. I mean understanding what melody is, harmonies, how many times you're going to layer things, where things need to be. The producer is deciding the drops and how the record is going to be finalized versus, and we ask this question a lot in a new age because there's this make a beat at home, email it to an artist, and then you don't hear your final product until it ends up on someone's album. And a lot of times those are new producers that don't feel like they have the right to step. They just want like so-and-so artist to take their beat. But when that person takes your beat, it's going to have your name on it. And that's going to be in your career for your whole history. So you have the right to sort of produce that record, to make sure that that record is the way that you want it to be. So that's the huge difference. Just making the beat don't mean anything.
So this is a good way to follow up on that. I on the podcast this week we interviewed Easy Mo B, who's iconic,
one of the greats.
Yeah, one of the greats, an iconic producer of 90s New York hip hop. And the reason that he eventually kind of fell out with Puff is because when the Flavor in the Ear remix came out, which y'all know the Flavor in Your remix by any chance? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So when the Flavor in Your remix came out, of course, one of the most heralded remixes of all time, Puffy took credit as being the first producer of that remix.
Right.
When in fact the beat was made by Easy Mo B. However, just like you said, that remix has a lot more than the beat. Vocally, there's a lot to it.
It's funny that you bring those up because I used to work with Chucky Thompson. Out of all of my Bad Boy experience, my stuff is Chucky Thompson and Derek Angeletti. And a lot of times Chucky was a keyboard player, so it was like, it was a factory in Bad Boy. So people would produce records and then sort of wait till the album came out to hear what Puff did to your record. You know what I mean? But I was in there with Chucky a lot of times doing those overdubs and like finishing a lot of records. That was sort of part of the machine Bad Boy at the given time, but still, I used to do as much as I could with like calling producers and letting them know, hey, at this given moment, we're going to be working on your record, just so they could have some input. But it was a thing of where certain people made decisions to break out because, you know, you could take Rashad Smith, you could take whoever that was in there in the beginning, and because of that very thing, they left. But then you also have to sort of understand the magic of what was going on by Puff's vision of layering over those sounds. But I'm driving home that point that as the producer, it's your job to figure out when that stuff is going to go on and to make a stink about it, like to say, I got to be in there to produce my records.
Just, is that, with your production, is that always part of it for you? Is there ever a situation in which it's as simple as someone getting a beat, or are you always hands-on with the record being made?
I've always tried to do my best to be hands-on with it, but the honest truth is, I also came up in a different era where there was no such thing as emailing a beat over. You know, I had to come to the session just to even track the beat out to 2-inch tape, so the artist could record and do their vocals. So I had the advantage of kind of always by default being in the room regardless. Now that being said, when I first started out, I was a bit more timid about maybe voicing my opinion because I'm like, you know, this person is such and such an artist and I'm just the kid making the beat. You know, as time went on, I became more confident. And I also had a little bit more leeway because I had a few hits under my belt to really voice my opinion and tell people, or give people my input rather. You know, there were times, you remember that late 90s, early 2000 era was when there was a lot of money floating around. Everybody and their cousin and their grandmother and whoever walked their dog had a record deal. Yeah. You know, if you had a hot record on Bad Boy or on Def Jam, your whole crew had deals. And I would meet with these A&Rs who'd be like, this person's gonna be the next Big or the next J or the next whoever, you know, and you get in the studio with them and I'd just be sitting there like, you signed this guy? You know, but because I was nobody at the time, I kind of just had to eat that. As time went on, I was able to play my position as a producer as opposed to a beat maker.
Going down the line, starting with you, Mannie, I want each of you to respond. Are you guys self-taught? Did you just get a machine and teach yourself over time? Or was there one particular person who was like, no, this is how you use this equipment? We'll start with you, Mannie.
I would say a little bit of everything. My dad was a street DJ. So my Christmas gifts was always something music related. When everybody else was getting a bike, I was getting a drum machine or, you know, a drum set or something like that. So I would say 80% of it is probably my dad, like, you know what I'm saying? And the rest of it is just, you know, just going off of intuition and seeing what I could come up with.
How about you, Jess?
I was taught by nobody and everybody at the same time. You know, I had nobody that ever showed me how to do anything technically in the studio or anything like that, but I was taught by just listening to the radio, the albums that I was buying. I started out as a DJ. So I think my biggest influences in my formative years were like listening to mixed show radio, when the only time you could hear rap on the radio in New York was from 9 to 12 on Friday and Saturday. And listening to what Red Alert was doing, what Marley Marl was doing, what Chuck Chill Out and Mr. Magic were doing. And I want to say probably around the time when, like, Marley Marl was like the first super producer in rap. You know, there were other great producers before him in rap, but he was the first one who was kind of branded. So seeing him having the In Control album and having him on the cover of his album in a private jet with the whole Juice Crew behind him, and seeing his EPKs on Video Music Box and things like that, and also Prince Paul, seeing him his EPK on Video Music Box where he was triggering samples with the Casio SK5, which I had. So I thought I had the same thing he used to make the De La Soul album. Right. So I couldn't understand why my beats didn't sound as good as his because I had the same keyboard. You know, not knowing that he maybe just used that for 1 or 2 sounds on that album. But all those things that I grew up watching were what taught me. Watching and listening to are what taught me. You know, I never had anybody that sat me down and said, this is how you do this, this is how you do that. Everything was just emulation and learning.
Osmosis is what.
Yeah.
KLC, what about you?
Well, as far as me and a friend of mine was in a group named Dart. His daddy bought us some equipment, so we pretty much learned how to use the equipment on our own. But after we got the equipment and I learned, I didn't do nothing but just copy Mantronics, Rick Rubin, and Larry Smith. And I think that's where what really got me into it, because I just never understood how in the hell Mantronic used to do the shit that he did without computer editing back then that they're doing now.
I still don't understand how he did that shit. And I was just talking about that 2 nights ago.
And it's just ironic that, to me, by far, is my #1 top greatest hip hop producer ever, along with, rest in peace, Larry Smith and Rick Rubin.
Guru, your skill set varies also, and obviously engineering is super complicated and technical. What about you?
I started off DJing. First of all, I think everybody sort of started off that way, and my DJing was purely a kid watching Jazzy Jeff. Like my whole life, I just wanted to be him. That was my archetype. And then later on, Kid Capri sort of brought in that like party rocking element, just the personality of Kid Capri. So my whole thing was trying to mix them two together.
I mean, that's the two. I mean, that's mixing the best technical DJ ever and the best party DJ ever.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And then from a technical aspect, mine was a little different because I come from Wilmington, Delaware. So we was like old school Jamaican style of building stuff. So I learned from all of my friends going to technical high schools and learn how to build speakers and crossovers and amps and everything else. And then I sort of became the guy that was teaching other people how to use the beat machines, because like I would go to like one local hustler's house and he had like an SP12. And I had no equipment at that time. So it was just like local hustlers that had the money to go out and buy equipment. And then once that MPC 62 came out, it was just like, okay, that's it. And then the 3000 came out and it was like, oh, I'm really in love with this thing. It was just that forever. But because I had to bounce around to so many different people, I knew how to work the EPS 16. I knew how to work this or that. And I was just teaching different people how to use the equipment.
Well, that's a great segue, because you mentioned the MP 3000. Starting with you, Guru, and going back down the line, the most essential piece of equipment, like that when it came out, you know in your head that when it's all said and done, if you have X, you're going to be all right. What is that piece of equipment you most love? Excluding, of course, the Technics 1200. We'll leave that out. Besides that.
I mean, besides your brain, the MPC 3000, again, is just my baby. It's what I grew up on. So for me, it's like that thing I could work blindfolded. And now, that sort of transferred into the MPC Renaissance for me. But the 3000, man, just blindfolded.
Okay.
Well, I have an 808 and it have MIDI on it, but I came up on a Kai, so in the 3000 by far is the best sounding Akai drum machine, period. And those two have to go together, because my 808, I've never sampled the actual drum machine because I already had it. Always had it with MIDI control so I can control it from the machine. So I have to put them two together, and those two, and I get on any keyboard or software as long as my drum's right. I could make anything else fit in.
My ears and a turntable. If I want to get technical, I don't really care what people use to make a beat, as long as it sounds good.
Right.
Justin's probably the only person that I know that has hit records on every single machine that you could possibly think of, and every piece of software that you could possibly think of. Like everything. Like this dude just goes out and buys the machine, and then like, oh, I don't really like that, but it has like 5 hit records in it.
And by the way, that's unheard of. I mean, it's absolutely unheard of. I mean, 90% of producers have one machine that they will tell you in 1 second is their machine.
Yeah, now if you look at a lot of my catalog, it was all made on different things. Like the record that introduced me to Jay, we did a record called Streets is Talking. That was an experiment. We all make beats in Pro Tools indoors now, but back in 2000, making beats in Pro Tools was not what it is now. But that was an experiment. I made Rock the Mic on an ASR X. I made the Blueprint on an MPC. I could go on and on. I don't really care about the piece of gear in the sense that, like he said, you get a keyboard, or when you have what you need up here, these tools are just methods of getting our ideas out, getting our visions out. So each one has its advantage, but there's no one piece that I say I have to have besides my ears and my brain, like Guru said.
Manny?
SP 1200.
That classic.
Yeah, SP 1200. Like, you know what I'm saying? I know it like nobody else.
What is it about the SP that you love so much?
the grittiness, like, you know what I'm saying? It's old school sampling, and it challenged you. Just imagine, like, all of y'all that, you know, that's doing music right now. Just imagine something that's 8 outputs, and that's it. And that's all you get is 8 sounds, and you got to make something incredible with 8 sounds. You know what I'm saying?
All the outputs sound
Yeah,
different.
and all the outputs sound different. Yeah. So you know, and you got to challenge yourself. You know what I'm saying? Like he said, use your brain power and everything in you to figure out how can I make 8 sounds an incredible song. Like, you know what I'm saying? Right now, everything is like nuts. You can use as many tracks as you want. Right. But I just love the fact, and the sample time is probably like no more than like 6 seconds in the thing. Yeah. Like, you know what I'm saying? That's what made it so great. You know, it made you challenge yourself.
Fresh, you ever put a record on 45 and that?
Hell yeah, I done spent some.
Or turn the record all the way off and spin it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember. I never used the SP1200 until after the Blueprint. When was Old Boy in that whole era?
Yeah, that was after.
03?
Yeah, that was after.
I bought a SP1200 like the day I first made Old Boy on the SP1200. And I was like, how the fuck did they used to do this? I always wanted one because I used to see the ads and, you know, I knew the legend, but when I actually tried to use one, I was like, oh, no, hell no.
No. Say, Fresh, while we on this SP1200 kick, I gotta confess to something, bro. You was supposed to buy SP1200 from your boy that worked in Peaches. I forgot his name. And I gave him $500 more than what you offered him.
So these days, a lot of the conversation that people have with regard to music and people making it is about how easy it is for kids to now get into music. With the availability of your Pro Tools, or even things that are much more basic, all the way down to Cool Edit. I mean, you can use anything to make a beat now. In terms of how that affects the overall landscape of music, and the fact that people now can do everything on their own, and there's less of a filter to getting to make music. Do you see this as being overall good for the quality of music or bad for the quality of music?
Well, I could speak on the point like what a lot of producers or beat makers need to understand. Just because you may have the same equipment as someone else doesn't mean your shit gonna hit like that. Let's get it straight. Because one thing you gotta get understood, you have 4 producers at this table, and none of us sound alike. And at one point, we all used the same shit before. So it's just to a point to where, like, regardless of what you get, if you don't think how we think, you know what I'm saying? I done heard some Jay-Z records that Guru mixed. And I know I had that same fucking kick, and I was like, why my shit don't hit like his? You know what I'm saying? But it's something that he did, and I was pretty much on the same, the same board, which Guru, that's his life, is behind the board, from when I was first introduced to him. You know what I'm saying? Like, when I read credits, I was introduced to you through Pat.
Absolutely.
And
another great engineer, by the way.
Pat Viala.
Yes, sir.
And when we came over there, just like I used to listen to the records, pretty much records that Blaze produced, and I was just like, I know I had the same fucking kick. This shit ain't making no sense. Why do my shit don't hit like this? You know what I'm saying? It's the same thing with Fresh. I heard Fresh when he was recording on a fucking 4-track, a cassette tape with 4 tracks, and we was using Simply in Sync. You know what I'm saying? So it's just that shit. Even back then when Fresh, because Fresh he put out more local records before, and he was the first one in New Orleans ever with SP1200, and it's just that even though I had an MPC, but I guess like they just said, I never knew that every output on the 1200 was different.
Yeah.
And that's what it was in my experience. So don't think just because you have the same thing we have, it's going to sound the same. You can forget it.
I don't know. I think it's good and it's bad. It has good parts to it where now you got access for people that really should be making music, and that guy doesn't have to sit and wait. We had to, like, or at least me, I hustled and did anything I could that was a legal thing. Like, my whole thing was, I'm not going to get into the street life. I'm not going to hustle. I'm not that dude. I done seen too many, of my people go from that. So I would do anything, paper route, work a job, whatever. But the part of that is that you have to, it's like you start putting into your craft and you start to value it. So what I see is that because the access is instant, the same value is not placed on there. So it was like, it means something to go in front of the pawn shop day after day after day and sit there and stare at the machine and ask the dude for the book and like ask him, can he move it to the back so don't nobody buy the joint? You know what I'm saying? Because I'm trying to like save up for my joint, and just reading and what you put into the thing. You know, I don't think people put that same amount into it because it's so instant. It's just like a hobby thing. It's like, oh, okay, I'm making beats now or whatever. But you know, I love it for the fact that the new producers can have so much access to all these sounds. But I just wish that they would put more into it in terms of the study and like mastering one thing. I think that part of it is negative. And then it floods the area for new producers and people that like are really, really good at what they do. Now they got to get around 500 other people that are like, oh, I make beats too, you know? Like,
Go ahead. Thank you, sir. I think I agree with him. It's good and bad. Like, you know, because I'm going to give you a perfect example without even saying this. You remember that Cash Money and Marvelous song?
yeah.
KL?
Mm-hmm.
What we used to get off of that song? Like
The bass at the end.
So it was this bass drum that was at the end of that song, like it was an 808 bass when the song went off, and it was just like this, and
People be quiet.
yeah, the ugly people be quiet, and it was this 808 that was like at the end of that record, and like it just was like he said before, email and all of that. You ran to somebody else's house and was just like, dude, did you hear the 808 on the end of that record? And that made it so creative because it was just that you had to get that 808 from somewhere else. Then you got a snare drum from another record, some other kicks from other things or whatever, and that whole little culture is gone now. You know, like kids get like a just like, and I'm a software freak as well, like, you know what I'm saying. But I still like getting kicks and snares and hi-hats from records in different places. And you don't see that no more. Like you just get, like you can go online and they'll have some shit that says just Blaze drums.
And they be the worst.
Yeah,
Worst.
you know what I'm saying?
Like I've downloaded my own drum kits.
That somebody else made?
It's not me. Sometimes what they'll do is they'll take one of my records and they won't even like find the open kick and snare. They'll just take whatever with the keys on it.
Exactly, and they'll chop that shit up horribly, like, you know what I'm saying, and you know what I'm saying, and then somebody will try to pass it on to you and be like, dude, I got Just Blaze drums,
Right?
And you just like, nah, dude, that shit ain't, you know what I'm saying, and I'm like, and to tell somebody is an art to that. Like, you know what I'm saying? If you want to get his kick, you got to go through some records and find a spot where that kick is open by itself.
That's what people is missing, and at the end of the day, it's like, it ain't no Just Blaze drum kit. It's the fact that he dug for vinyl and dug for records, and like, that's, okay, there's a part of it that's digging, and then there's a part of it where there's like the old guy in the store that knows so much that you don't know. So you learn so much from beat digging, and I don't think it's no more beat digging going on. It's like way more textures than just the standard kicks and snares. Or like, I was at one level, and I'm thinking I'm the shit, and then I meet Just, and it's like, oh, wow, somebody that's way above me in terms of knowledge of records. So it's like just building with other people. But if you're just sitting in the crib downloading drum kits, you're never going to get that experience.
Yeah, I think the advent in technology, or the fact that actually the hardware has caught up with what the software is capable of, overall is a great thing. It allows those of us who have the talent but don't have the means that were necessary 10 years ago to make records to actually make records. The problem is it gives other people a lane to make a lot of bullshit, which is okay, you know, because I feel like ultimately, if you're making bullshit, it's going to be recognized as bullshit. And every once in a while, the bullshit gets through. But for the most part, I feel like, you know, records, I firmly believe that records and good music finds its way to where it's supposed to be. You know, like, even in my own personal experience, records that I made that I intended for one person, and when they didn't take that record, I was really upset about it. They went somewhere else, but then that record ended up being a #1 hit for like 7 weeks. Whereas had that other person made it, it probably would have came and went. You know, good music finds its way to where it's supposed to be. And ultimately, you know, I mean, you can listen to a record that somebody gave you and be like, all right, yeah, this is bullshit, and you move on from it. You know, whereas somebody else will make a record, you can tell instantly that it's a hit. You know, whether that person is, how can I put this? Whether that person is I just totally lost my train of thought.
I'll jump in. Don't worry.
No,
Whether that person
actually,
is
I know what I was gonna say.
whether that person is Drake or I was going to name 2 random artists. No, but I think the point remains the same for all of us, honestly, and I feel the same way you guys do, which is that ultimately, even though it sucks that back in the day you had to have a certain amount of money to buy your way into the game, right? Basically, right? Even if for me it was saving up for turntables, right?
Right.
There wasn't software you could get. You had to spend $1,000 on 1200s. It was the only way in.
Right.
Yeah.
Even though that's tough, it's sort of tough love that's necessary to kind of like you earned your way to the table. At least you showed enough commitment to get a
Right.
summer job, to raise some money, so now you're here at the party. It is a little bit annoying, and I do think that we could use a little bit more of a filter, but to the point Just was just making, you're right. If you look now at the list of the top producers in the game, or the newest ones, the ones who make it to the top are still very good.
Exactly.
They're not
That's what I'm trying to
flukes.
say. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
Right. Or that apprenticeship period goes beyond just making beats. It's like, okay, you live somewhere that's not New York or LA or something like that, and then there's a million people hitting me like, yo, how do I get on? And I'm like, yo, like, come to the city, go to a place where you know people about, oh, I don't got money to do that, but you got an ounce of weed in your crib. You know what I'm saying? So like, which one is more important realistically, like the weed or the plane ticket or the bus ticket? Are you willing to get on the bus? The bus ticket is like $40, $50. You might got to be on that joint for 2 days, but again, because there's no apprenticeship period, you think it's just supposed to come. That's the real thing I'm saying, like put in that work.
And then there's the double layer of how socially weird the newest generation of artists and producers are, because part of the being social part of making it is no longer
It's no
part
longer
of it.
there. But no,
Yeah.
because we're all communicating through the internet now.
Right, so you meet them and you're like, oh, you don't have any you don't have any charisma at all. I thought you'd be really special.
Can I say this? Since we saying tough love, and I know y'all, this gonna hurt coming from me, but it's time. It's almost time for the 808 to go away. They killing that motherfucker. It's time, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, they done wrung it out. So as producers, it's time, man. Try some new shit. Stop just downloading that 808 kit. It is time.
Well said. A PSA from Mannie Fresh, ladies and gentlemen. I would love for each of you guys to recall for yourself one credit of yours, something either you produced, you wrote, something you were involved in, that if people were to sort of summarize you, you know what I'm saying? That as my old producer used to call it, this can either be a bad thing or a good thing. It is the second paragraph in your obituary, right? Hopefully that second paragraph was a great radio host on Hot. No, I'm gonna shoot out of that. Became the biggest television late night host in history, and was also on the radio. You hope it wasn't like was convicted of child porn. Either one of those things can happen in the second paragraph. You hope the second paragraph leads with something amazing that you accomplished. For you guys, musically, what would that great accomplishment be that you're always proud of? I'm gonna start with you, Jess.
Oh, damn.
Sorry, you were looking at me. You made eye contact.
Look. So I had a late night last night, man. For me, really, to be honest, I would like my second paragraph to be that I was able to use my God-given and family-nurtured talent to make something of myself, and make some great music and touch people along the way. And I feel like my greatest accomplishment is when I'm out at conventions like these and people approach me with the same excitement that I would have had when I was young, had I randomly ran into Large Professor or Larry Smith or RZA or anybody else. Like, the fact that I've become that for somebody is the most amazing thing to me.
Okay, well, I'm not going to accept that cop-out answer. And if then they said, hey, give me a CD. If you met President Obama tomorrow and he was like, oh, Just Blaze, I think your stuff's really great. Give me a CD with a couple of your songs on it. I'd like to hear what it sounds like. What would you give the president to hear?
I would just give him PSA and drop the mic and walk away.
There you go. Okay.
Fine.
That's a pretty good choice.
By the way, when you meet Obama, you will not be handing him a CD.
Not at all.
Secret Service everywhere.
KLC, is there one piece of work you're most proud of?
Oh my goodness, it's like my shit kind of have stories behind it.
You could tell us a story.
Which one? Down for my niggas about it. Which one?
You want to hear down? Who wants to hear about Down for Mine?
Man, Sugar Hill sue me for that fucking Make Him Say on record.
All right, we need down. We need.
All right, tell us the Down for My story.
Well, I'm gonna kind of shorten it because I think both of them is definitely. You know what? Since the bottle is short, let me do that.
Okay.
Well, I was in my basement working on the body record, so I had all the synth sounds on the SR10, and you know every producer get a producer's block. So my back was turned, and so you know. My head down trying to think of something. Before you know it, my daughter came down and just slapped the MPC pads, right? So I spanked the whip, because she used to always come down there and see me do it. And so she happened to came down. She came down and did it. I whooped her, spanked her, sent her upstairs, and came down, and that was the beef about it, the drums. And when she finally, you know, used to see these big-ass manila envelopes, and she understand what royalties was, and she was like, well, Daddy, if you said I did the drums, why I never get it? Because I said the motherfucker P never paid me. Shit, what you expect? So, shit, you sue me, I sue him, so you'll be waiting just like me, shit. So, but Down for My Niggas was a record that I was in the studio just chopping up this Isaac Hayes record. So C Murder called me. Man, you hear these motherfuckers on radio talking that shit? Call Magic, have a beat ready, I'm on my way. So I'm up in there making the beat. It's not even registering on how I'm hitting the pad, so I'm just hitting it. And it took the time for him to get off the phone and get to the studio, and the beat was done. So Magic came up there, rest in peace. He heard the beat. C Murder was already up in there laying the hook. Magic had a cigarette. Doing this thing, he wrote his part. C Murder laid the hook. So after we finished that part, I called Snoop. I'm like, Snoop, nigga, I'm about to have the hardest song on your album, I'm telling you. Say, KLC, I don't know, man. You know, Drake gave me some banging ass shit. I say, Snoop, I didn't say I was gonna have the most bangingest shit on your record. I said, I'm gonna have the hardest beat on your record. So they were like, okay, nephew, you know, whatever. So I called Silk. I'm like, Silk, man, you gotta get on this record. Pick me up from the airport. So he picked me up from the airport. I had it on cassette. I popped it in, Silk listened to it. Dude, I thought you was calling for a hit, man. Call me when you get a hit. So I'm like, what? Turns out he did a favor. And we get to the studio, so Snoop laid the symphony record that I did, that I really didn't want to do it because that record was too much of a classic. Certain records you just don't fuck with. But Snoop insisted because every Snoop record, he will redo a classic record.
Yep.
Right.
And after we did that, I was like, well, let's get this other one done. And he was like, oh, nephew, we do it tomorrow. We'll do it tomorrow. So, so I was like, well, let me just put it on tape for you. So he was like, okay, cool. So I popped the ADAT tapes in. I threw all the faders up on the board. The beat came on, and it dropped, zoop. Everybody told Snoop, all his partners and Crips that we're not, fuck that. You about to do this record right now. So his two biggest ones stood by the door. They wasn't letting him leave till he did the record. He really didn't like it at first because I think Snoop changed his verse. The verse that's on the record is not the one he initially wrote. Because if you ever see Snoop perform that record, he never does his verse. He only do See It Magic. So one time Snoop came, New Orleans, we was eating crawfish. He said, nephew, I owe you big time. He said, now when I come to the South, I know I got me a record that gonna bang. And just the fact that when I got in the studio with Snoop, when he first came, I'm thinking about all of his expectations from Dre. So I'm behind the board, which is an O2 Aura. He in the booth, probably about the size of 2 closets. So we stood there looking at each other for 5 minutes, like I'm waiting for him to tell me how Dre recorded him. So we like, nephew, just whatever you want me to do, just let me know. And that's when I really learned how easy it is to work with Snoop. Snoop is an artist that want to be produced, period. And that was like my biggest experience.
And it was a crucial experience time for Snoop too, because at the time, a lot of because things were weird and it was weird for everyone in hip hop that Snoop was even on No Limit. People started like there was a worrisome minute there where people weren't sure how the Snoop story was gonna go, and that record was incredibly important. Mannie Fresh, what's the one?
Man, if I met the president, I would first start off by saying, give this to your old lady. Back that ass up. Give this to Michelle. You know, back it up. Wow. I would say Still Fly, dude. And the reason why, everybody hated that record. Everybody, like, they was like, I don't know what he doing in there and shit. He talking about everything in his mama name and shit. And at the time, I was really living like that. Like, you know what I'm saying? But I guess music paint this picture that everything is all right in your life. Like, you know what I'm saying? Because people, you know, I was just a music head. I wasn't worrying about, you know, what the shit was generating until I looked up out of my drum machine and was like, oh, shit, I'm not really getting paid at this. Like, I'm just doing music. So the shit that I was saying in that song, it was really me. Like, I was really doing that shit. So that's why I felt so passionate about it. Like, you know what I'm saying? And it was just like, dude, he in there tripping, da-da-da-da. And at that time, Juvenile had left Cash Money, and it was just like, dude, this lights out over here, ain't shit happening. Like, they like, man, without Juvie, y'all not gonna make it. And then it was just like, he in there singing some shit about Gucci suits and so I would say that song right there, you know what I'm saying? It made me believe in me, like, you know what I'm saying? Because the whole design of it was me. Besides that, and the mind of Mannie Fresh, like, you know what I'm saying? It was just, fuck, that's the last thing you want to do is give a producer a room and tell him go off. Like, you know what I'm saying? Sometimes you got to be like, man, pull a plug on him. He just going crazy in there. Like, you know what I'm saying? So I would think by far Still Fly, like, you know.
Fresh, but just to ask you this right quick, wasn't that a song that you originally did for Mystikal at one time?
No.
Oh,
I
okay.
had something similar to that for Mike, you know what I'm saying? And he passed on it.
Yeah,
It's
like
alright,
he
though.
did all the good
That's your
shit.
dude.
Young Guru, what song or project is
Oh man, I can't even choose. It ain't no Jay. Even though the Jay stuff is just like incredible, don't get me wrong. Like, it's fun to sit there and look at the blueprint because you do that in a weekend and it becomes this monumental record. And it's like watching Just make beats back to back to back. That was fun. But I don't know, I get more enjoyment out of like probably the Freeway project. And it's not about how big the record was. It was just about like, Jay was already Jay, you know what I'm saying? Don't get me wrong, Blueprint from that point on was like adding on to the legacy, and it really, you know, made him an incredible artist. But
I mean, we essentially executive produced that
yeah,
album.
if you look at Freeway from the moment, like watching him from the moment he came, the moment he signed, then it was like him and Just striking this relationship. Just was already like getting hot, but this was the first time where Just sort of like produced a whole record, and it was like that kick you into I can do whole records and introduce new artists. And it was just right after like the Miami time of when we did the first State Property album, and it was just a really fun time. So I would have to say Freeway's first album because it was just like intense making an artist from the beginning, and Free's such a creative artist that he's just like, this is what you want me to do? Okay, let me try this. He'll try anything, and then him and Justice hit a stride, and it was just incredible. Like Rock the Mic was done in like, you know, even though that was for State Property, it was like the same sort of time period. It was done in like 5 minutes. You know, there's no way to really tell PG versions of the Miami stories, but you know what I mean? Like, we was on our way to the strip club. We was out. You know what I mean? And then Free was just like, yo, Just, we've been out here for like 3 days. You ain't made me nothing. And that's why he probably did it on the ASRX, because it was just whatever was right there. He just flipped it. And it just became a huge record. So probably Freeway project.
Well, listen, I think I can speak on behalf of everyone here and everyone in hip-hop when we say thank you to you guys for all of those things that you put together, because they are all some of the best music that we've ever seen in the history of hip-hop. So, first of all, we salute you. And before we put a bow on this is very cool, because this is not the end of the fun. Tomorrow night, Doors 8 show 9 o'clock, the Super Producers Beat Summit. brought to you by BMI and Flight School. We are going to have the battle of the catalogs between Mannie Fresh, DJ Toomp, and Just Blaze. So that's what I'm going to be doing tomorrow night. Opening set by Sunny Digital, surprise guest performances. It's going to be a blast. I want to thank you guys for doing this, man. This was very special for me to be a part of, and thank you guys all for coming. And thank you to BMI and Flight School. We appreciate it.
Talk about that experience of the indie versus major. What were the key differences that stood out to you, pros and cons wise, in those changes?
The major, you get a bunch of money up front, and you never see anything again. And indie, you get no money up front, and you never see anything again.